Yeah. You know I'm going to be early.
Roll in, roll in. No, roll in. Roll in. Right, get them down at the,
Albritton has left the room.
don't do anything.
I hope this isn't being televised.
Come on, here. Okay, here we go. Right.
Lost Albritton.
Yes, I can. Okay. Good morning, everybody. It is the April 13th, 2020 work session. We are under fairly unusual circumstances with council members Hamilton, Albritton, Bunker, and Beckman all off-site, coming in remotely. I'm here at City Hall with the city manager, city attorney, city clerk. I want to start out with a roll call. Councilmember Hamilton. Are you muted?
Hamilton.
Can you hear
Present.
me? Okay, thank you.
10-second delay.
Thank you, Joel. Councilmember Albritton,
Present.
Councilmember Beckman,
Present.
I see her. Can you hear me, Kathleen?
Present.
Councilmember Bunker.
Yes, I can, Mr. Hibbard.
I've got you, Councilmember Beckman.
Present.
Thank you. All right. Just a quick disclaimer here. Pursuant to Executive Order Number 20-69, issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically, which is what we are doing today, or at any specific location, and utilizing communications media technologies such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Section 120.545B2 Florida statutes. On Thursday, we are going to have public comment either by Skype or those people who arrive here. As I already said, council members Hamilton, Albritton, Bunker, and Beckman are all remote, with the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk present with me here. Ms. Aiken?
The material for each item on the agenda is available at www.myclearwater.com. During city work sessions, no public comment is permitted. If you wish to comment on an agenda item for Thursday, you may do so through e-comments by submitting written comments or videos to clearwatercouncil@myclearwater.com. Or on Thursday, you may appear at the city council meeting in council chambers to be heard. That's it.
All right. With that, item 2.1.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, approve a purchase order to Asphalt Paving Systems, Inc. of Zephyr Hills, Florida, in the amount of $520,043.70 for Harn Boulevard roadway reconstruction pursuant to City of Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.5641D, other government entities, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kivett is going to present all of the engineering agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. Good Mayor, Mayor and Council. Tara Kivett, Engineering Director. The pavement cross-section on Harn Boulevard from Stewart to US 19 lacks a sufficient structural layer. The traditional mill and overlay technique will not solve this problem, so staff recommends a specialty roadway reconstruction process called full depth reclamation, or FDR, to rebuild Harn Boulevard. This FDR will be completed for less cost than traditional complete roadway reconstruction and less impact to the residents. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Kivett? Councilmember Hamilton? Any questions?
No questions, good for consent.
Councilmember Albritton?
Yeah, I just had a question reading through the specs on this. Is the Super Pave 12.5 says it's similar to HK1, that the type of asphalt mix?
Yes, correct, and we frequently use 12.5 on a roadway of this volume and nature.
My question would be, and because I'm talking over myself,
Just take your time.
okay, no question, you answered it, thank you.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yes, I have a few clarifications. Number one, I understand that we're piggybacking off a City of Largo purchase agreement. And I wanted to know, what is the advantage of doing a piggyback rather than an RFP?
Councilmember Beckman, in this case, it was not only quicker, but the pricing was more than competitive, and it was such a small amount. We're not doing roadways all over the city like we would in our traditional resurfacing contract, that it made sense to piggyback off of an existing contract.
Other questions, Councilmember Beckman?
Okay, and I have another concern. So a number of, yes. A number of residents in Morningside are concerned about a number of soft spots in that section of the road, and they want to make sure that they're thoroughly taken care of, especially because there are apartments being built in that area, and they are concerned that traffic's going to increase, and that part of Harn is a thoroughfare kind of way. So they really want to make sure that those issues are being addressed.
Councilmember Beckman, I understand why you're taking the AirPods. Okay, hold on, everybody. Councilmember Beckman, I understand why you're taking the iPods out of your ears, but if you do, which makes sense so that you don't get the feedback, turn the microphone up towards your mouth so that we can continue to hear you. I think that's a good way to deal with it, but when you pulled them out, they were pointed down at the desk, and so we couldn't hear you clearly. So the soft spots?
Okay, sorry.
No problem. This is a learning curve we're going to run through together.
But due to the
Okay.
that's one reason we thought the
Yep. Yeah, the soft spots, and yep.
that's one reason we
So
thought
the soft spots, the increase in traffic with
right. So that's why staff is recommending this FDR process. It will improve the roadway sub-base up to about 12 inches. So a much more robust method than just your typical milling and overlay.
Any other questions, Councilmember Beckman, and is this okay for consent?
okay, I have another question on the page, on the estimate. There's a 10% contingency for $47,000, over $47,000. What does that 10% contingency mean?
We typically include a 10% contingency in all of our construction projects, and so it gives a little leeway in case we want to expand the scope slightly, or there's some unforeseen conditions. So that's standard practice.
Anything else, Councilmember Beckman?
Okay, I'm good for right now. Thank you.
Councilmember Bunker?
Well, one last question. One last question, sorry. On the Largo agreement that we're piggybacking, there are 64 items, and I just wanted to make sure, is all of that included in our Clearwater work?
No, no, ma'am. We got a proposal just based on our needs for Harm Boulevard using the complete contract and line items that Largo procured. So in other words,
Okay,
right,
thank you.
the proposal dated February 21st that you're looking at, those are the line items needed to do Harn Boulevard, when the Largo contract did have some other line items that we will not be using.
Councilmember Bunker?
I have no questions. You have my consent.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple other questions. So, when did we do the traffic calming on Harn and throughout Morningside?
I believe that may have been in 08.
07, 08
Yeah.
was what I, does that make sense? So should this need, to the extent that we're doing, it seems like normally you'd just be doing milling and repaving. Did the contractor back in 07 not do a sufficient job?
I don't know enough, I wasn't involved in that project, so
Okay.
sorry, I don't know enough about what was done. If we did do anything, it would have just been surface treatment. So over years, some of these older roadways need more than that. And so this method, which we haven't done very often, we're kind of trying out a new method to do some more roadway reconstruction without doing it in the traditional sense of tearing up the whole roadway, recompacting. So we've talked to other municipalities. Largo's very happy with this FDR method, so we thought we'd give it a try.
And just for the public to know, this is reusing the pavement and using another aggregate and binder, basically,
Correct.
to reuse this. This isn't going to a landfill or somewhere else.
No,
It's getting reused. I think that's something that folks ought to know.
right. It's a fairly newer process, and special machinery comes in and tears up the whole roadway, mixes it up, adds a structural binder, and then replaces it.
So with some of the residential that's going to be going east of Morningside, have we done a traffic count out there lately? I mean, are we getting a lot of cut through again?
Not to my knowledge. I believe our traffic manager did address some of the residents' concerns about this pending development, and looking at the traffic counts and the size of the roadway and the expected volume, they were in support of the development and what we're doing to Harn.
Okay. And are any other projects getting bumped or delayed because of this?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. We will put that item on consent. Item 2.2.
Approve a proposal from construction manager at risk Keystone Excavators in the amount of $25,378.20 for the construction of David Avenue property stormwater improvements and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kivett again.
Thank you, Tara Kivett. A recent condition assessment of our stormwater system showed that the 2 large storm pipes in this area need some repair. The project will repair these stormwater pipes using structural lining and add a junction box for improved access in the future. Any questions?
Councilmember Hamilton, questions on item 2.2?
No questions, good for consent.
Councilmember Albritton.
No questions, good for consent.
Councilmember Beckman.
No questions, good for consent.
Thank you, Councilmember Bunker.
No questions, good for consent.
Thank you all. Item 2.3.
Approve the conveyance of a distribution easement to Duke Energy Florida LLC, DBA Duke Energy, for the installation, operation, and maintenance of electric facilities to support Duke's new transformers and facility installation at 297 South Glenwood Avenue, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kivett again.
The proposed easement will provide Duke Energy with the property rights necessary to construct and maintain their electrical improvements in support of the Crest Lake Park renovation project. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Kivett? Councilmember Hamilton.
No questions, good for consent.
Councilmember Albritton.
Consent.
Councilmember Beckman.
No questions, good for consent.
Councilmember Bunker.
No questions, good for consent.
Thank you all. Item 2.4.
Approve supplemental work order 6 to engineer of record Duell and Associates of Clearwater, Florida, in the amount of $4,800 for Druid Road, Allen Creek Drainage Improvement Project, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kivett again.
The Druid Road Stormwater Improvement Project has encountered numerous engineering challenges. Staff recommends this supplemental work order to Duell and Associates, an engineer of record who has worked on the project, to do some minor scope increase work to better address the project. Any questions?
Councilmember Hamilton, questions for Ms. Kivett?
Yeah, I guess my only real question is this isn't going to delay this project by any degree, because I know this has gotten more complaints to me than almost any other project going on right now. But other than that, consent.
No, we're still on schedule to complete the project this fall, which was the most recent end date after we've added all the work on Hercules.
Councilmember Albritton.
Well, Councilmember Hamilton asked my question, and thank you, Ms. Kivett, for answering it. So I'm fine with consent.
Councilmember Beckman.
I just have a question about the $4,800 charge. So, on the second, page 104 for Duell Associates, the scope of sequence says it's responding to a request from an adjacent homeowner, which I think is great. But my question is, it's $4,800 to revise a design, and that this work will be completed in 7 days. So I don't have any concept of how involved this is to revise the design, but $4,800 seems like a lot. And when I look at invoicing procedures under C, it says that a short narrative summary of activities completed in the time period will be provided. So that'll be interesting to see the exact work that was done for close to $5,000.
Do you want to address that, please?
Sure. Yes, it includes some survey work, drainage design is actually somewhat complicated and time consuming, so hence the $4,800, which really in the big picture is a fairly minimal amount for the services that Duell is providing. It's in line with what our expectations were and in line with similar projects. And the 7 days is just for this small amount of work, but it's being added to the larger project, and Duell and Associates has been the engineer of record and design team for the entire project.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Beckman?
Okay.
Consent?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Councilmember Bunker?
Yes.
I have no questions. You have my consent.
Thank you. Item 2.5.
Approve an increase to Pinellas County in the amount of $55,548.15 for the joint project agreement between Pinellas County and the City of Clearwater for the Hercules Avenue Sidewalk Phase 2 project from Sherwood Street to Sunset Point Road, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kivett again.
Right, thank you. This joint project agreement, or JPA, with the county is for offsets of city water and sewer sanitary infrastructure in the county's right-of-way along Hercules, necessary for the county to complete some sidewalk improvements in that area. Council previously approved an initial funding amount based on an early design estimate. The actual bids came in slightly higher, and hence we are asking for your approval of this request. Any questions?
Councilmember Hamilton, any questions?
No questions. Good for consent.
Councilmember Albritton?
No questions, good for consent.
Councilmember Beckman?
No questions. Good for consent.
Councilmember Bunker?
No questions. Good for consent.
Just one question I have. Do we, I hope we're kind of keeping an eye on what construction costs are going to do through this period right now. I expect that they may start dropping at some point because there are going to be some businesses that are not going to have the money to go forward with projects. So this one is seeing escalations. I just hope we keep an eye going forward.
Yes, yes, we will. Again, this was mostly due to, of course, that the estimate was on such an early design. And you know, the county made some changes at some of the intersections that required some additional offsets of our infrastructure. But you're right, estimating construction costs in the future will be a little off because of what's happened.
Great, thank you. Item 2.6.
Approve the First Amendment to that certain contract for exchange of real property between the City of Clearwater and Creative Contractors, Inc., and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kevin again.
The city and Creative Contractors entered into a contract on January 21st, 2020 for the exchange of the city-owned David Avenue property with Creative's Drew Street property. The contract provides for an opportunity for the parties to conduct due diligence of their respective properties to determine suitability for its intended use within 90 days of the effective date of the contract. The contract provides for a closing date on or before October 1st, 2020. The planning processes and due diligence by the parties have been disrupted by the COVID-19 virus, and therefore Creative Contractors is requesting an extension of the inspection period to August 22, 2020, and the closing date to December 30th, 2020. In addition, the Planning Department and Engineering is requiring a 12.5-foot right-of-way easement along the east side of the property, which will better serve Creative Contractors with a loop for solid waste and fire access between David Avenue and Elizabeth. The new provisions are provided for in the amendment. The remainder of the contract provisions as written shall remain intact. Any questions?
Any questions? Council member, let's change it up. Albritton.
Consent.
Councilmember Beckman. I shouldn't have done this. Councilmember Beckman. Councilmember Bunker.
No questions. I give my consent.
Councilmember Hamilton.
No questions, consent.
Councilmember Beckman.
No questions, consent.
Thank you all. All right. Item 3.1.
Approve purchase orders to O'Neill's Tree Service, Tip Top Trees Experts LLC, and Blades of Green for palm pruning and maintenance services in a total annual combined amount not to exceed $205,000 for contract term April 1, 2020 through March 31st, 2021, with 2 one-year renewal term options at the city's discretion, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Cater.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. I'm Art Cater, Interim Director of Parks and Recreation. The item that you have before you today is a procurement item for palm trimming and maintenance around the city of our various palm species. We divided this contract up into 3 main areas, one Clearwater Beach, the second one downtown and Memorial Causeway, and the third area is around our ball fields and areas that are east of Highland Avenue. We are recommending multiple vendors as basically a best practice measure to make sure that the work is done on time and within schedule. In the past, we have had various times where we did not have enough vendors. The vendors actually either could not do the work or do the work on time, which results in palm seeding, ending up on the sidewalk, and it is a mess. So we are recommending the 3 vendors, O'Neill Tree Service, Tip Top Tree Experts, and Blades of Green. Funds are available in our operating budget for this item. With that, I'm available to answer any of your questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cater? Councilmember Hamilton?
No questions, consent?
Councilmember Albritton?
I think it's a good plan, consent.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yes, I have a few questions. I was wondering, have we used any of the vendors before? And did we check any references with other municipalities? Do other municipalities use these?
We have checked on the references that each of the vendors that were selected had to provide those to us, and we did that. As far as working for other municipalities, some of them did. The only one on this list that has worked for us before, I believe, is Blades of Green.
Hello?
Yes, who's speaking?
Okay, I have another question about the paragraph that comes under your vendor. It says the $205,000 will, Kathleen? Yep. Will cover the cost for the servicing areas as well as any supplemental work needed. What does any? That seems pretty broad. So I'd like to know, what does that really mean?
The supplemental work would simply be the same type of work. It would just be on additional palm trimming that we may need through the year. This contract basically is for one trim of every palm that we've mentioned in the bid, with the exception of some palms like the queen or the medjool palms. We have to trim them twice a year. The additional money would simply be if we had to go out in a neighborhood or someone complained or concerned about their palms in their neighborhood, we would go out and perhaps trim those palms.
Other questions? Councilmember Beckman?
Thank you. I have one additional question.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, when we look at the bid sheet and we're looking at the vendors and their their prices, some of the quotes range from $26,000 to $95,000 for the Clearwater Beach area. I was wondering, if we look at the RFP, what is the big difference in those quotes that came in?
Again, I can't tell you. The quotes basically range. You are correct. There's a wide variety of the quotes. Some of the companies have very small staff and can only do so much work. Others have larger staffs, more equipment, that type of issue. I cannot explain to you why one is higher than the other, quite honestly, because there was an RFP and they submitted the bids. They all have the same information, and this is what the funding that they bid.
Anything else, Councilmember Beckman?
Okay, thank you. And one last question on the emergency rate per hour. That means during a hurricane, is that correct?
That would be, yes, any type of issue, we would have to call them out. It could be hurricane, it could be any other disaster, or tree, a car might run into palm trees, that type of thing.
Anything else, Councilmember Beckman?
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Bunker?
Oh, okay for consent.
No questions. Good for consent.
Mr. Cater, I have to admit, I look at the Clearwater Beach. We're using Tip Top in the downtown and the causeway, but we're going with O'Neill's on the beach at 2.5 times the price of Blades or Tip Top, basically. And we've determined that both of those are qualified.
That is correct.
I don't know why we wouldn't use one of those on the beach. And I understand why you want to diversify and not be committed to one contractor, but the delta on that to me isn't worth it.
It is very large, but in the RFP that we did submit, we did indicate that they could only get one of the areas. So we'd have to change that to allow them to get more than one area in the RFP. It should be pointed out also that Tip Top, it comes out of Ocala, so we're not real sure of their work. But we do have good references wherever they have worked.
Well, going forward, I would hope that we don't put that clause in. I'd want a little more latitude, because I think the difference on that is unreasonable.
Understood.
The other thing I'd like to point out is this is a $205,000 contract just for palm trees. And some of the people in the previous campaign wanted to plant 1 million trees within the city, which is 37,000 per square mile. I just want them to know how much that would cost, even though it might be a very admirable goal. The city would be spending millions of dollars a year on tree trimming. So that's just a commentary. Item 4.1.
Authorize a sole source award to Water Specialist Technologies LLC of Sanford, Florida for copper precipitant TR50 in the annual amount not to exceed $100,000 for the initial contract period from May 1, 2020 through April 30th, 2021, with the option for 2 one-year term extensions pursuant to City Code Section 2.5641B, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Porter.
Good morning, everyone. David Porter, Public Utilities Director. I come to you this morning to ask you to authorize the purchase of a chemical called TR50 that's used at our wastewater treatment facilities. The purpose of the chemical is to remove copper from the waste stream so that we can then comply with our permits from the Department of Environmental Protection to protect the water sources that we discharge to, which is Old Tampa Bay and Clearwater Harbor. So with that, I will ask if you have any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Porter? Councilmember Hamilton?
Sounds like we need it, so no problem, no consent.
Councilmember Albritton?
Consent.
Councilmember Beckman?
No questions, okay for consent?
Councilmember Bunker?
No questions. Okay for consent.
Item 4.2.
Authorize a sole source award to Andritz Separation of Arlington, Texas for centrifuge belt filter press and appurtenant sludge dewatering equipment parts and service in the annual amount not to exceed $300,000 for the initial contract period of May 4, 2020 through May 3, 2021, with the option for 2 one-year term extensions pursuant to City Code Section 2.5641B, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Porter, again.
Again, good morning, David Porter, Public Utilities Director. With this item, I ask you to authorize the award of a contract to Andritz Separation of Arlington, Texas. The purpose of the contract is for them to be able to provide us with parts and equipment for the maintenance of our centrifuges and belt filter presses at our wastewater treatment plants. Both the centrifuges and the belt filter presses were manufactured by Andritz, and they're the sole source provider of the parts and service. With that, any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Porter? Councilmember Hamilton.
No questions, good for consent.
Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, my question is, didn't we just rebuild the presses at the Marshall Street plant, Mr. Porter?
Okay, is it ready? Okay, that is correct. The belt filter presses at Marshall Street and at Northeast have been recently, actually been replaced with remanufactured units. But still, there's going to be maintenance of those units, so the belts themselves need to be periodically replaced. There's components that wear out very quickly on those belt presses. And the centrifuges likewise are continuously being maintained. So it's a maintenance and repair and replacement contract.
And not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
We may not
right.
get close to
That's correct.
300,000.
That's correct.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Albritton?
Yes, consent.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Beckman.
No questions, okay for consent?
Councilmember Bunker.
None. You have my consent.
Thank you, sir. Item 4.3.
Authorize a sole source award to Premier Magnesia of Wayne, Pennsylvania for ThioGuard in the annual amount not to exceed $75,000 for the initial contract period of April 22, 2020 through April 21, 2020, with the option for 2 one-year term extensions pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances Section 2.5641B, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Porter again.
Again, David Porter, Public Utilities Director. Good morning. I ask you with this item to authorize the purchase of a product called ThioGuard, manufactured by Premier Magnesia. We utilize this product at both our Marshall Street and our Northeast wastewater treatment facility. It's used in what's called the anaerobic digestion process, where we do the first level treatment on our sludge. This product helps us break down oils and greases in that reactor, and also helps provide necessary alkalinity to keep the process running properly. So with that, I will entertain any questions you have.
Questions for Mr. Porter? Councilmember Hamilton.
No questions, good for consent.
Councilmember Albritton.
Consent.
Councilmember Beckman.
No questions, good for consent?
Councilmember Bunker.
No questions, good for consent.
Why don't we use it at the East Plant?
Don't have a digester there.
Okay. Item 4.4.
Authorize the award of invitation to bid 2320 stainless steel manhole inserts to the Randazzo Group LLC of Clearwater, Florida in an annual not to exceed amount of $145,600 with the option of 2 one-year extensions at the city's discretion, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Porter again.
Again, David Porter, Public Utilities Director. Come to you this morning to ask you to authorize the award of a bid, a contract for stainless steel manhole inserts to the Randazzo Group. The purpose of these inserts is to help us control infiltration and inflow into our sewer systems. So when it rains, water will puddle up on the streets. The manhole covers are not fully sealed or tight, and water can run into those manholes and get into our sewer system and overload our system. It can overload not only the sewers, but our lift stations and our wastewater treatment facilities, and cause sanitary sewer overflows or problems with the wastewater treatment plant and have it discharge incorrectly treated water. So these are a means of helping us to control that inflow of water into the sewers and protect our system. With that, I'll answer any questions anyone has.
Councilmember Hamilton, questions?
No question, good for consent.
Councilmember Albritton.
No questions, consent.
Councilmember Beckman.
I have a few questions. Can you explain, I just want to understand, is it an insert or a cover? What's the distinction?
Okay, the manhole product that we're obtaining here is actually an insert. So the manhole cover will be removed, the insert will sit in and will sit on the rim of the manhole cover. There's a seal, and then the manhole cover will be put back on. So the purpose is to capture any water before it goes into the manhole.
So it's a gasket of sorts.
It's not only a gasket, there's a gasket, but there's actually a metal pan that fits right into the manhole.
Okay.
So between the cover and the manhole interior.
Other questions, Councilmember Beckman?
Okay. Yes, and I noticed that we have a cost of $145,600, and if they're $112 each, I'm assuming we're getting 1,300 of these inserts or gaskets?
Yes, that's not to exceed amount. Again, what we'll do is we'll put in as many of these as we can in a given year. It does take some work for us to do that. Each manhole has to be, you have to go to it, you have to remove the cover, you have to do all the cleaning, you have to replace the rims where necessary. And we want to get as many of these in as we can. We have thousands of manholes in the city, and we'd like to have every one of them have a pan. We've been working at this for about 2 years, and this is a continuation of that work.
Any other questions, Councilmember Beckman?
No, thank you. It's good for consent.
Thank you. Councilmember Bunker.
Hi. No questions, good for consent.
Thank you. So I'm assuming you triage where we need to do these
Yes.
first.
Well, actually, it's a big, long process. We've been doing an infiltration and inflow analysis and study for almost 7 years.
Okay.
And we've identified areas that need more triage than others. It not only includes these manhole inserts, but many other things that are happening as well, linings and so forth. But the easiest one, the low-hanging fruit, is actually these manhole inserts. So we work on those whenever we get an opportunity to do so, and the staff's available.
Very good. We'll put that on consent. Item 4.5.
Amend the City of Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Sections 32.211 and 32.212 to add definitions to specifically prohibit hazardous waste pharmaceuticals, to add requirements for dental facilities that remove or replace dental amalgam fillings, to add reporting and waste management practices for dental facilities, to require installation, certification, and maintenance of dental vacuum suction systems, and to provide exemptions from these requirements and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading. Mr. Porter again.
David Porter, Public Utilities Director. Okay, I come to you today to ask you to pass on first reading changes to the ordinance that regulates our industrial pretreatment program. The purpose of these changes are for us to enact and to be able to enforce changes in our program required by the Environmental Protection Agency. Back in 2017, EPA issued a new rule that over time was going to implement a series of events that would culminate in preventing waste pharmaceuticals from large facilities such as hospitals and manufacturers of pharmaceuticals from entering our wastewater treatment systems. Unfortunately, pharmaceuticals get into our system, they pass right through it. There's no treatment involved. So we're trying to prevent pharmaceutical products from getting into our waterways. The dental amalgam portion of the rule, dental amalgam has mercury in it, so that's really the component that we're trying to prevent from getting into the system. Again, mercury does not get removed effectively in our treatment facilities, so we're trying to remove dental amalgam, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's quite a bit from the dental facilities, and prevent mercury, therefore, from getting into the surface waters. So that's the purpose for the amendments to the ordinance.
So do we test periodically, though, to make certain that, I mean, I know we have to go through federal water testing.
Yeah, every year we do a very large analysis on our reclaimed water that includes mercury, and the mercury levels are really very, very low in our water. But that's not always true everywhere in the United States. So the EPA, when it enacts an ordinance or a rule, it's for everyone. And so we're enacting this rule, so it'll only make it even better for us when we have even less mercury in our water.
And how are we enforcing?
Well, in the ordinance, our obligation first was to notify the dentists in the area that there was a new rule taking place. We've done that. We've sent them all letters and said, here's something you need to be aware of, here's the rule that you need to comply with, and here's some of the things you must do. They were supposed to come back to us with a plan, and all but I think about 40 or so have done so. So we've got a second series of letters going out now asking them to comply with our rule, and the EPA rule, actually. We don't have any teeth in our ordinance now. That's why we're putting it in. So once we have this ordinance, if they don't comply, then we're going to have to try to determine why they're not. And we're going to have to do some kind of periodic inspection. This is all brand new. EPA, even though they promulgated the rule back in 17, just last, I think it was August, actually later than that, probably November, just finally came out with the DEP's guidance on how this was to be done. So that's why we're bringing it to you now.
And they don't give us money to
No.
enforce
No.
or
No.
make certain that all the dentists are following the process?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Hamilton? I just wondered if you had questions.
No questions. We'll
Talk
address
about
the
it on
ordinance
Thursday.
on Thursday.
Okay. Councilmember Albritton, any questions?
It's just amazing that we have mercury in the wastewater, but it comes from people's mouths and the dental amalgam. So, but no, I don't have any questions.
Councilmember Beckman?
Consent.
We'll talk about on, yeah. It's an ordinance. Right?
Yes.
Councilmember Beckman?
I have questions. Mr. Porter said that he sent out notices to dentists and that 40 responded. I would like to know, like, how many notices were sent out in totality, and when will this go into effect?
All but 40 responded.
Yes.
Right.
I'm sorry, perhaps I wasn't clear. We sent out, I don't know the exact number, but it was quite a few, and I think all but 40. So most of the dentists have complied. And we're, like I said, working now to get with those dentists that have not done so and asking them to provide us with their plan.
Oh.
The ordinance for them actually, or the rule for them actually goes into effect in June. So our ordinance will get ahead of it, and the deadline for them July. So they must comply by July 14th.
Other questions, Councilmember Beckman? We will discuss this again on Thursday, but I'd just soon get some of the questions out so you're prepared.
Bring the total number.
I will. I will.
No. No, it's okay for consent.
It's an ordinance, so we'll actually talk about it again on Thursday, but I want to make certain that staff had all the questions that you might throw at them on Thursday. Councilmember Bunker.
I was going to ask about the exemptions, but I see that they're pretty well explained in the ordinance itself. So I'm fine for consent.
Item 5.1.
Thank you.
Authorize a purchase order to Siemens Industry, Inc. for inspections, maintenance, and repair of fire sprinkler systems in the not-to-exceed amount of $275,000 from April 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.5641D, Other Government Entities Contracts, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Wyke.
Good morning, Tom Wyke, Building and Maintenance Superintendent. Staff is requesting the ability to piggyback an existing contract for Siemens Industries for various fire sprinkler inspections, repair, and maintenance throughout the city with the length of this respective contract.
Questions, Councilmember Hamilton?
No questions. Good for consent.
Councilmember Albritton?
No questions, consent.
Councilmember Beckman?
No questions, consent?
Councilmember Bunker?
No questions. You have my consent.
Item 6.1. Thank you.
Councilmember David Albritton to serve as vice mayor. Council members, according to recent rule changes, the next rotation of the vice mayor begins this year with Councilmember Albritton's seat, unless there's a rule change.
It's very prescriptive now.
Yes. So, are there any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Call? All right, we'll take care of that on Thursday.
May I place it on consent or?
It's fine with me. Anyone opposed to that? Councilmember Hamilton?
No question.
Councilmember Albritton? You can't speak on this. You're going to be the vice mayor. Councilmember Beckman?
No question.
No questions?
Councilmember Bunker.
No questions.
Okay, item 6.2.
Appoint council members as representatives to serve on regional and miscellaneous boards. Council members, in your agenda pack, you have a list of all the boards, and I have also provided each one of you a list of those boards that you have expressed an interest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down the list, and then based on what the interests have been expressed so far, and then I'm going to also highlight those boards that have no interest expressed whatsoever that we need representation on. The American Public Gas Association, Mayor Hibbert has expressed an interest, and Councilmember Hamilton currently serves as the alternate.
Let's let Councilmember Hamilton do that.
Okay. Who would serve as the alternate?
I'll be happy to serve as the alternate. I've served on that board before. Councilmember Beckman, you're not interested in that one?
No, I'm okay
Okay.
with that one.
Number next.
Area Agency on Aging of Pasco Canals. It's currently has been fulfilled by the Office on Aging Manager Carrie Marsalic, but I know that Councilmember has expressed an interest to serve on the board. What I'd like to add is Councilmember Beckman, since there are other boards that do not have any representation by council that are required, if you may, since we do have staff representing the city on that particular board, and they have one elected official serving on that capacity, I believe it's really meant for the regional staff or city employees with one elected official on that actual council. Then there's the Big C, the Barrier Islands Governmental Council. Right now we have council members Hamilton and Beckman who have expressed an interest. I would need a second alternate, and who would actually be the voting delegate?
An alternate and a second alternate?
Yes,
So,
we require 2 alternates.
okay. Well, I'll be happy to be the second alternate.
And will Councilmember Hamilton be the voting delegate and Councilmember Beckman be the alternate?
Councilmember Hamilton, do you want to speak to this? And Councilmember Beckman? There's no easy way to do this, so.
Yeah, I will say that I have been the I've been the voting delegate on this body previously. Mayor Criticus did it while he was mayor, but I have served on this, and I know the organization well. I know most of the members that are on it, the Big C, and I'd be happy to serve as the voting delegate.
Councilmember Beckman? Would you be willing to serve as the first alternate?
That's fine.
Okay. Homeless Leadership Board?
Yes, I can serve as a first alternate.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so the next one is the Courtney Campbell Scenic Highway Citizens Advisory Committee. I have no volunteers. It meets quarterly on the 3rd Friday of the month at 10 a.m.
Anyone want to step up for that? Okay, we'll revisit that one.
The Homeless Leadership Board,
I have said that I'm willing to sit on any board that the city wishes to appoint me to.
All right, Mr. Bunker. Courtney Campbell, Scenic Highway, my friend.
Homeless Leadership Board, I have Councilmember Beckman. The Mayor's Council, Pinellas County, obviously the mayor. Pinellas Collaborative Committee, I do not have a volunteer.
And do you want to explain to the new council member what that committee does?
I wish I could. I'll have to get back to you on Thursday.
Okay.
What is,
So even the old council members. All right. We'll get some more flavor on that
I'll
on
get more
Thursday.
info on that one, sorry. Let's see here. The School Transportation Safety Committee,
that's what I'm not familiar with.
now they meet as needed. I can see if they are still active, but obviously they would address school transportation, the School Transportation
Yeah,
Safety Committee.
It still meets because Cundiff was on that.
But I don't have a volunteer for that one.
Beckman being a former teacher might be good for that.
Anyone? School Transportation Safety Committee. It's a meet as needed, by the way. It's not, okay, well, we need to fill these at some point.
Okay. Moving right along to Suncoast League of Cities, I have Council.
I can serve on that if nobody else steps up. That's no problem.
Okay?
Thank you. The Suncoast League of Cities Board, I have Councilmember Beckman has expressed an interest to serve, and currently serving as the alternate is Councilmember Hamilton.
Okay.
The Tampa Bay Estuary Policy Board, I have Councilmember Beckman, and Councilmember Hamilton's currently serving as the alternate. The Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, Councilmember Hamilton is currently serving on the board, and Councilmember Beckman has expressed an interest.
Well, let's go back to those two. So do you desire to continue on Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, Councilmember Hamilton?
If I may, Frank.
You would like to continue?
Yeah, he said if he may.
Yes, I would definitely like to continue on the Regional Planning Council, and I would, yes, I would, and
And Councilmember
I
Beckman
would,
was,
if I could I see if Councilmember Bunker would like to take my place as the alternate on the estuary, Tampa Bay Estuary Board.
did Councilmember Beckman show interest in the
She
estuary?
showed interest in the estuary.
Yeah, Councilmember Beckman is interested in the estuary, so I would say give that to her, if that's something of interest. I would also tell you, don't overload yourself too much. So,
Councilmember Bunker, would you like to serve as the alternate on the Tampa Bay Estuary Policy Board?
Well, I do have, I'm,
Sure, that'd be fine.
Councilmember Beckman, go ahead.
well, I don't want people to make assumptions about, boards that I would want to serve on, because I did send Ms. Call a list, and I'd be willing to, fill in if nobody else steps up for some of these. For example, the estuary board wasn't part of the first choices, because I am, cognizant of not stretching myself too thin.
Okay, you're writing down the indication on all these, so maybe we need to look at the balance of things.
You want me to review what we have, or I can make the changes for Thursday and we can discuss it again for Thursday with all the
Yeah,
changes?
we could discuss it again Thursday.
Okay.
But I mean, I'd like to get as many finalized as we can. Okay, so estuary board is still empty.
No,
You're,
I've got, Councilmember Beckman as the
Okay.
appointment, as the
Okay.
appointee, and then, Councilmember Bunker as the alternate.
okay. Go ahead then.
All right, so the next one would be Forward Pinellas. I have Mayor Hibbard and Councilmember Beckman as expressing interest to serve on the Forward Pinellas board.
So Councilmember Albritton, I mean, this has been, is also on the PSTA. I think we've had a lot of discussions back in the day about transportation and, at one point we separated it between council members, and then I know after I left, it was combined so that you had one council member that was kind of being the transportation guru. I mean, I had been chairman of the MPO back in the day and vice chair of T-BARTA, but I'd like to hear from you, Councilmember Albritton, because if there are items that you're working on and want to complete, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, both PSPA and Ford Pinellas, I'm on subcommittees on those as well. Ford Pinellas, I'm on the legislative committee. And on PSTA, I'm on the planning committee as well. So Clearwater has an interest in getting some infrastructure built for PSTA.
So you would like to stay on both, is what I'm hearing, is that correct?
So I'd like to continue with both of these if possible.
It's somewhat of a philosophical discussion, which I don't know that it's not very easy to have with this format. Councilmember Hamilton, what are your thoughts? You've been here for both formats, back when we split transportation and when we combined it.
You're right. I mean, I was on the Pinellas Planning Council before it became Forward Pinellas, and yeah, there is some crossover in the two. I would say that having one person is not a bad thing, but as long as we're able to communicate within the Sunshine Law, having two people is, divvying things up so people aren't overloaded in their professional lives.
Thoughts, Councilmember Bunker or Beckman?
I don't have anything to add at this time.
Again,
Councilmember,
I'm ready to serve whenever.
No, multiple screens. Wow, we're getting fancy. Okay. All right, Rose, then I will leave Councilmember Albritton on PSTA and forward Pinellas.
All right, pension
Can I
advisory.
make a comment?
You may. Go ahead, David.
One of the things that was brought up with Mayor Creticus was we probably should have some more discussion about what I am finding out in these different meetings I go to, because there's a lot of information on transit and on Fort Pinellas that I would like to bring to council to kind of give updates. So you could keep that in mind. I think I'd like to work that in.
Well, I would welcome updates. We did that at one time, and I would welcome updates whenever you think it's appropriate that you talk to Ms. Call and add that onto an agenda item. Back when we had members on PSTA and the MPO before the PPC and everything combined, we did do some noticed meetings with the two members to actually talk about issues. That's obviously not necessary when you only have one member on both of those boards, but I think it would be good for the rest of the council to be brought up to date, because there's always some spillover into some other boards throughout the region that transportation is critical. So we'll look forward to those updates, Councilmember Albritton. Skull.
The Pension Advisory Committee, currently I have Councilmember Hamilton serving on the committee, and then Mayor Hibbert has expressed
Thank you.
interest. And I need one more council member to serve on that committee. Councilmember Bunker, are you willing to or able to serve on that committee? It meets every other month here in Chambers at Thursdays at 9 a.m.
Councilmember Bunker?
Willing and able.
Okay.
Provided to join.
PSTA will remain with Councilmember Albritton. Sister Cities will remain with Councilmember Hamilton. The Downtown Development Board, Mayor Hibbert has expressed an interest, and Councilmember Bunker has expressed an interest.
Okay.
We can discuss it on Thursday to see who wants. I just need one member to serve on that one.
I have a question, if I may.
I've got Albritton.
Yes, Councilmember Hamilton?
Yeah, I think Rose just answered. Doesn't Councilmember Albritton already serve on the DDB?
Yes, so Councilmember
And is he not
Albritton.
interested in continuing, or?
Councilmember Albritton will remain unless he wishes not to serve on the committee. So I would need one more council member to serve on the board.
Comments?
If I may chime in, this is Councilmember
I will.
Bunker.
You want me to
I have
comment?
another comment or
And it's
question.
one
Hold
thing
on,
that I requested
hold
to-
on, everyone. Councilmember Bunker has the floor.
Thanks. So this is the one board that I asked to be on, and I think it's where I can be of the greatest service for all the folks who voted for me. The primary issue going forward with the downtown development is the intimidating presence of the Church of Scientology. It's not the key problem downtown, perhaps, but it's one that we need to address. And I'm willing to ask the questions and try to get answers as to who owns the properties and what their plans are for them. And we need to work out some sort of way for folks to report any concerns and harassment, whether it's businessmen or customers or folks who live in the area who may have faced intimidation. And I also have...
I don't know if that's the purpose of the board, Mr. Bunker, but...
For many, many months now, going downtown shooting videos at different restaurants explaining why people should come downtown. Well, the purpose is to create a vibrant downtown. And this is an important facet of that. And for 40 years now, the key thing keeping downtown from prospering has been people's fear of coming downtown, either because of the intimidating presence of Scientology's cameras, or they just don't want money going into Scientology's pockets. And I disagree with both of those. I've been encouraging people to come downtown, and everyone should feel comfortable downtown. And I think it helped to actually deal with that issue, to make sure that the downtown can prosper. I hear from people all the time who don't want to open their business here in Clearwater because of the presence of Scientology.
Okay. Councilmember Hamilton, I believe I heard your voice, and Councilmember Albritton. So, Councilmember Hamilton first. And if I was mistaken, just tell me.
Well, I think, my only problem or position is, my only problem is, given past DDB meetings, Councilmember Bunker was in a very confrontational position when he was on the other side of the dais. When you're on this board, you're not there to present or have your personal position as much as represent the city's position. So I would say, if Mr. Bunker is going to be on this board, if his actions deem necessary for us to replace him at a future date, we will not hesitate to do that. But if it's a productive effort, then I have no problem seeing how it works.
Councilmember Albritton?
If I may respond to that.
Well, let me
give
Councilmember Albritton a shot first.
I've served on the DDB for years, and we are the job of the ex officio member, which that's what we would be now that we're council members and we sit in on the meetings. The ex officio member is we just advise what the policies are of the city. We're not really a voting member, part of the board. The board is actually elected by the downtown people, an elected board. So I would be fine if someone else wanted to take my position as an ex officio. And it would be, I just want Mr. Bunker to know to clarify what his position would be there, not a policymaker.
Councilmember Beckman, do you have anything to add to the conversation? Otherwise, I'm going to go to Councilmember Bunker.
No, I have nothing to add right now. Thanks for asking.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Bunker.
Thank you. And Councilmember Britton, I appreciate your comments. I understand what you're saying. Also for Mr. Hamilton. If you take a look at the first appearance that I made at the Downtown Development Board, I came with a very simple question. If Scientology is the reason people aren't coming downtown, are Scientologists the answer? And the answer should be yes, they are definitely part of the problem. We have to figure out a way to work with them in a way that they will be the good neighbors they pretend to be. I just heard yesterday from somebody living at 1100 Apex saying that the owner of an empty lot nearby came by and said to the city apartment manager there that they're going to start calling the police if people keep trespassing on the empty lot next door to their building, where this gentleman who contacted me said he and his girlfriend go out and play Frisbee to get a little recreation during this lockdown. And I understand that what my position would be, but I do feel that this is an only Nixon could go to China moment for the city, where somebody who understands Scientology and is willing to have a peaceful dialogue is the appropriate person to be starting to tackle this singular issue that the people of Clearwater definitely are interested in tackling.
Okay, anything else? Ms. Aiken, you wanted to comment?
As you may be aware, Mayor, there is an existing long-term injunction which includes Councilman Bunker and the Church of Scientology that requires, that may be relevant to this situation, requires them to remain 10 feet in separation. I'm taking a look at this injunction, but it appears to be applicable. So members of the church, of which I believe there are 3 or 4 on the board, and Mr. Bunker are required to be separated from each other by 10 feet. So Mr. Bunker, that does require or cause some logistical issues for the board that could be met. They obviously can be in the same room, that's not an issue, but they would logistically need to be separated from each other, which is unusual since they meet, I believe, in this room. So, so there is that consideration.
Okay. Well, let's address this further on Thursday.
All right. The Florida League of Mayors and the Tourist Development Council are both appointed and represented by the mayor. So
All right, and I would be happy to address that whenever I have an opportunity.
We'll talk about it further on Thursday, Mr. Bunker, if that's all right. I want to ponder some things.
The Audit Committee, we need one council member to serve on this committee. I would like to note that due to recent legislative changes, the committee no longer allows, or statute no longer allows that staff serve on the committee. So we will need to comprise the committee of either as many elected officials, which would be the council members, and appointed citizens that are to serve on the board. And staff will be coming back later regarding the membership to this committee. Obviously, for Sunshine Law, we will not be able to have more than one council member serve on the board unless it's noticed as a council meeting.
How many members are on that audit committee?
I think right now, Jay, the finance director did advise that they're looking into it. Right now they're working out the RFP for the new auditors, so we have the new auditors on board. The committee needs to be comprised of at least three members. So all I know is that staff will be coming back regarding the actual committee, the citizen representation on it. Right now we have one citizen on the board that we believe is willing to serve, continue serving.
Mr. McLaughlin is great, so.
Yeah.
And then does Jay serve as well? And then
He will no longer be allowed to
he can't
serve.
because no staff. All right.
So I do need one council member, and no one's volunteered yet.
Well, I'll do it. I mean, I've been through so many audits with all the not-for-profits I've been on, so.
And then the last board that we need a volunteer for is the WorkNet Pinellas Board, which meets quarterly at the Epicenter.
And Councilmember Hamilton no longer wishes to serve on that.
Correct.
Okay. Do I have a volunteer for WorkNet Pinellas? Don't rush in. Okay, we'll need to fill that then at some point.
Well, if I may,
Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
What does WorkNet Pinellas do?
It's dealing with jobs creation and labor
yeah,
issues.
WorkNet Pinellas,
Go ahead, Councilmember Hamilton.
if I can, Mayor, okay, the position we have, or the city has on WorkNet Pinellas, it's a non-voting position with attendance not required.
But can you expand on what the board does for Councilmember Beckman's edification?
It is it's kind of a clearinghouse for employment. A lot of, people are able to come to WorkNet Pinellas to fill out the application. They'll have a list of job opportunities, and it's kind of a clearinghouse middleman for connecting people looking for work with jobs that are available.
Councilmember Beckman, any other questions on that?
I'll serve on that board.
Very good. So that does it,
That
correct?
does it. I'll make the changes and present it for Thursday's meeting.
All right, item 6.3.
Amend council rules to allow discussion prior to making a motion and adopt resolution 20-17. Council members, in your agenda pack, as directed at the last council meeting, I have presented a draft amendment to rule number 6, order of business, which would allow council to discuss prior to a motion being made, as well as in rule 8, first paragraph, debate of motions and tie votes, which again addresses that council may discuss an item prior to a motion being made.
Any questions on this item? Councilmember Hamilton?
No
Albrecht?
questions from me at the present time.
Albrecht?
None.
Beckman?
No questions at this time?
Councilmember Bunker?
No questions.
Okay. We will discuss that further on Thursday. Are there any questions on second readings?
Well, you've got the.
Mayor, I had 2 items before that.
I'm sorry. Item 7.1.
Thank you.
It's good though.
The first item is to confirm the emergency rule of procedure for public meetings and adopt resolution 20-15. Council, this is the rule of procedure that you're going to use for your remote meetings. So you're adopting rules for the use of communication media technology for public meetings during the health emergency due to COVID-19. That is the process that is outlined and talks about how the public will participate, etc.
Any questions for Ms. Aiken? Councilmember Hamilton?
None here.
Councilmember Albritton?
None.
Councilmember Beckman?
No questions?
Councilmember Bunker?
My questions are only concerns about the technical issues with the long delay. I'd be happy to talk about those with the city manager and IT as we go along.
Okay, very well. Item 7.2.
Confirm the COVID-19 emergency proclamation and adopt resolution 20-16. This is the, you have declared an emergency. Mayor, you have extended that emergency as of the last 2 Wednesdays. This is required to be done every 7 days. And resolution 20-16, council confirms that declaration of emergency.
Any questions, Councilmember Hamilton?
No questions.
Councilmember Albritton?
None.
Councilmember Beckman?
No questions?
Councilmember Bunker?
No questions.
Okay. Any questions on second readings? Councilmember Hamilton?
No questions.
Councilmember Albritton?
None.
Councilmember Beckman?
No questions?
Councilmember Bunker?
No questions.
And I only had the question on item 7.13, which we might as well get done this morning, which was the condition of the roads that we were annexing and the stormwater issues, and are we buying ourselves trouble?
So Tara Kivett, Engineering Director. Mayor, the portions of, Charles Street that we are annexing from the county between 580 and McMillan Booth are in good shape, as is Daniel Avenue, that south portion. That's also in good shape. We have not done an in-depth analysis of the under drain and storm system in that area. There just hasn't been, I didn't have time. Your question was last week. But typically, we annex based on planning's initiatives and our policy of when there's more than 50% of the lots in the area that are already part of the city. To be honest, condition of the roadway is not one of our main reasons for whether we annex it or not. So in this case, it's more of a planning item that we would have to make sure that moving forward, we can maintain that infrastructure. So it's more of a long-term funding and planning process.
This neighborhood just looks different from a lot of the places that we annex. And I don't see any stormwater. I have not had a chance to drive out there.
No, there's not. There's actually a county-owned pond, which they will continue to own because that's on private property right there at the corner of Charles and Daniel. And then Allen Avenue to the south, which we annexed previously, is probably in the worst shape. And that already does belong to the city.
Okay.
So there's some improvements needed out there.
All right. Fair enough. Thank you. City manager verbal reports?
Mayor, I was wondering, is Michael Dell connected to us in any way? Michael, are you on? Mayor, Council, if he isn't, I wanted him to give a kind of a short update on Imagine, so we'll do that Thursday night.
Okay.
There are some questions that we'll need the council to answer as we continue to move forward with the previous direction. We feel we're at a point where we need to have some council discussion. That's all I have. I don't
All
have
right.
anything else.
Ms. Aiken?
No, sir.
Anything else, Ms. Call?
Nope.
Okay. And I just want to thank everybody for their patience today. I want to thank staff and our technical folks. I know that this is not an easy endeavor, and I know the delay for the four of you at home is not easy. We will get through it, and I look forward to seeing all of you on Thursday. With that, we're adjourned.